Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78. If you're from a certain era, you grew up going to the movie theaters, it was a huge event, and a movie like The Goonies should be seen on the silver screen. That is why on April 26th at 7:30, Auditorium Theatre, the giant auditorium, beautiful theater, downtown Chicago, the Goonies are back on stage for one night only, accompanied by the Chicago Philharmonic. So you have this entire cast of musicians up on stage with the Goonies. It's going to be a wonderful night. Now, I'm talking to the conductor of the whole thing. I'm going to try to get the name correct here. Chiago Chaverio. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
Okay,
well
good.
done, well done.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining me on the show here. I appreciate it. We just talk, we hang out, have a good time. That's what this is. And what
Yeah.
better thing to talk about than the Goonies with live music at the Chicago Auditorium Theater? That is spectacular, and you're the person to do it. I've read a little bit about you. You're like the maestro, if you will, of all of these things, these movie adaptations to the musical scores and everything else. How did you how did you get into this?
When I was a kid, I would basically I would uh, uh, um, um, stay up with my father watching films. My father is a huge cinephile. He loves every kind of film, and basically when I was young, I slept 4 hours a night. So just because I don't know, so I would
Uh-huh.
stay up with him and we would watch films, and so I also love films. But I wanted to become a musician, and when I started to study composition at now Mars Hill University in North Carolina, I
I've been there
decided why not
before.
write. You have been there before.
I
That's
have
amazing.
been to. I almost went to
Yeah.
school there. Yeah,
Wow, that's so cool.
long
So
time.
yeah, I decided why not write film scores? You know, why not like join my love of like just music in general with film. So yeah, that's kind of what I started doing fresh out of school, and then
Mhm.
went to NYU to do my master's in film scoring. Did that, and then yeah, just basically got pushed to conduct, and then eventually to basically take films and
Mhm.
adapt them so that they can be performed live. And for those of you who don't know, what we do is we basically show the film live. So meaning, there's the film itself. We have the dialogue and the sound effects come out of speakers, but
Mhm.
then the
Mhm.
music we perform live in sync from the very beginning to the very end of the concert. Everything is synchronized to the film. Uh, so yeah, it's always a challenge, but it's always super gratifying, um, especially when things come out well.
It, yeah, I imagine. Huh? Is it tough to stay on time with the score of the movie? Because music is a live thing. When you're doing it live like that, it's living, breathing. There's human beings, and all that. Is it tough to stay I mean, I guess this is like kind of playing to like a click track if you're like a drummer in a rock band or something, like keeping time, or is that what musicians do? And this is super easy.
It's no, it's not easy. I mean, so number one, of course, you have to be clear enough that the orchestra wants to follow you, right?
Hmm.
So that's number one. And then number two, you have to be with the film. And yes, you can do it with a click track. Some shows are done with click. Um, but I kind of prefer, because I come from the symphonic world and from opera, I prefer doing it off click as much as I can. So basically what I use is a visual cueing system, is basically like a version of the film that has flashes and little bars that come around like this,
Hmm.
um, that basically come like from Alfred Newman, so way back at the beginning of film scoring. Uh, and then it basically got kind of like an update with John Mauceri, who was Leonard Bernstein's assistant and
Hmm.
worked on. He was the uh, founding conductor of the Hollywood Bowl. He conducted there for 17 years or something like that. And I've been John's assistant for 14 years now. So, I kind of learned to develop the system with him, so like basically he took the system, he added some stuff, and then I, due to my needs and to my thinking of how could I do this better, which I'm always thinking how to do things better, then I added more things on top of that. So, that's kind of how I synchronize things live on stage. It's never easy. It's always challenging. And we're very much complicit with the orchestra, and we have to be clear enough for them. But also, of course, at the same time, I try to be on time, but not just that. You want to be expressive, and you want to bring, breathe life into the music. So that's the like the next challenge is how do you make it musical, within that grid of tech, 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 tech in your, in your brain. So yeah.
Yeah, I imagine, some people probably when they go to this are like, there's no way that's real. They're not playing. They're playing to a track or blah, blah, blah. This is all live. So, because you have those naysayers out there that just want to like prove people wrong. But, in all fun, but still, I mean, how many people are up on stage for something like this? Specifically like what we'll see at the Auditorium Theatre with the Goonies.
Oh, about 74 or so, 74,
Yeah,
75,
that's a lot, yeah.
something like that. I've done everything from 60 few, 62 or so, 60, 65, to 124 musicians.
Wow.
Well, actually more if you count singers. So if you count singers, probably like 280. Because some
cow. All on one stage.
Yeah, because some shows have a gigantic orchestra, but then on top of that, there's like a men and women's chorus, children's chorus, soloists, and all kinds of stuff. So some shows are really, really heavy. A lot of people on stage. But it's always challenging. It's never easy. But to go with what you're saying, like to me, one of the biggest compliments that we can get is, oh, I forgot you guys were there.
Because it's seamless.
Because that means that like, the music and the film are so entrenched and they're working so well together, and like the mixing of the sound and the whole experience is working so well together that basically they kind of like get absorbed by the experience and they forget that there's an orchestra on stage.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, a lot. I'm sure if you are not a person that goes to hear symphony or or any kind of live music all that often, or if they're little kids, and I've had this experience with my kids, when you bring them to something like this and they see people playing the music that they've only heard on the screen in the house, when they see real, like all of a sudden, you can see their brain connecting the dots going, oh, those are people playing those instruments. It's not just made up. It's not, part of it's movie magic when you watch it in a movie, right? This beautiful score that lifts the movie up and drives the movie. But then when you get a little older and you start understanding, that's a soundtrack or that's a musical score, and then you can put real people in that, then you get back to like, oh, like a real orchestra did this back in 1985, like this whole thing, it's been all put together, but that's such a huge and important piece of the movie magic.
And that's the thing, is like, we have to remember that someone actually wrote the score, in this case, Dave Grusin, who's a jazz pianist, fantastic musician, and the score is just absolutely gorgeous. It's a wonderful score, and so the way that I work is, someone comes to me and says, hey, can you make this film into a concert so that we can do it live on stage? And I get all the music that I can from the composer, very often in his handwriting, in his actual handwriting, which was the case with this show.
Really?
And then I have to figure out, okay, what was used, what was not used? Was there something in the orchestration that was cut? Maybe there's a trumpet line. Oh, wait a minute, this is not in the actual finished score, so I'm gonna, like not write it into my, my film because it's not in the it's not in the score of the film itself. So, and sometimes there's music there. Oh, wait a minute, there's music here, but I don't have the scores. Sometimes there's music that starts at the beginning of the film but ends up at the end or in the middle, or it gets cut in the middle, or like a chunk gets used in one cue. Things get moved around and shuffled. So everything can happen, And so my job when I receive all these materials is to sort out what to use where, and then deliver something on stage that is going to be a good show, a good concert experience, something where the orchestra is not sitting on stage twiddling their thumbs while the film is going, you know. So I basically want the orchestra to play as much as I can so that people who are sitting watching us have a good experience, but then also so that we musicians have a good experience on stage also. The thing I don't like at all is to be sitting there waiting for the next music to come in and doing nothing, you know.
And you've done a lot of these. I mean, you've done, I was just reading a little bit here at Paddington, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Grease,
Yeah.
Call Me by Your Name, which was in Korea, and
Yeah.
you've done The Nutcracker. I mean, how many of these have you done now?
Cinema Paradiso, Twilight, Hunger Games. Oh gosh, I think 12 or 14 by now. I also did Get Out, working with
Which is completely different
composer
sounding than,
Michael Wabels, who was
Yeah.
an absolutely fantastic person. It was wonderful working with him on that film. Yeah, I've done, and the very first one was Love Actually, which is a huge hit. I mean, every year there are so many Love Actually shows throughout the whole world.
yeah.
And never
That's
could
hard.
I have like thought that, you know, when I got called to do Love Actually, and I love the film, it's like, oh my God, this film is so great. It's so quirky.
too.
I never could I have thought that that would be the beginning of this long journey of, you know, taking films and, you know, bringing them to the concert hall.
But it's taking you all over the world in doing this,
It has,
right?
yeah, it has. I'm very, very blessed, and you know, hope that we can keep doing it more and more. You know, so
Yeah, they keep making movies. So, you know, I feel like is there a movie out there that you haven't done where you're like, that's like that one will challenge me the most because it's so difficult, or it's the storytelling is so out of my comfort zone, but I want to tackle something like that.
oh gosh, I mean, there are different challenges. So, for instance, I just conducted Pirates of the Caribbean, and I do a lot of work for Disney. So, and there were a couple of scene transitions in Pirates where I had to pull things out of my hat, so to speak, because it was just so difficult to actually, synchronize those things specifically. So sometimes, we have synchronization challenges. Other times we have, like orchestrational challenges. So for instance, with Get Out, Michael had put so many synthesized sounds into the score. And my take is I want to do as much live as I can. So
Sure.
I was actually taking the synthesized sounds and like devising ways for the orchestra musicians to do them live on stage. So, using what we call extended techniques for percussion and wind instruments and strings, so like the whole orchestra was doing things that they're not used to doing, because that's how I figured, okay, this sounds like this. This sounds like a bowed cymbal and, like a string with a lot of pressure going, up bow, going,
that's
and
you trying to
maybe
make.
some wind coming from a clarinet going.
Oh, you
So
have to put all that in there. Like, I didn't realize, like, the wind that you're talking about, or like an electronic sound, you have to make non-electronic, right?
yeah, I mean, we don't have to. We could always like put a synth
But
on
you're
stage and have the
professionals.
synth go ploof,
Uh,
hit a key and the sound comes out.
sure.
But if the synth is already busy doing something else, and you have that sound, and you can incorporate it live, as opposed to having it also pre-recorded, which is an option. There's one option, which is to actually have it pre-recorded
Uh-huh.
and have it come out of the speakers and have it mixed with the orchestra live. But I try to keep that to a minimum, because to me, the point of the experience is we're performing live in front
Yeah.
of you. And so I want as much as I possibly can to be performed by us and not by some recording. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different set, it's different ideal, and a different set of tools for getting things done,
What has been one of the more challenging ones that you've worked on, where you really had to bend your brain to be like, how do I make that a sound that we can play versus drop a track in there?
Definitely Get Out for, because
Yep.
of all these different sounds there. I kept hearing going like, wow, what is that? It's like, I've never heard this sound before in my life, and I have to figure out how, if I can, how to make this come out of the orchestra. So that definitely was very, very challenging. How the Green Stole Christmas was challenging in a few places because of synchronization, because when we have a cue, and a cue is basically, when we film composers sit with a director and we talk about where does the music start, where does it end? Okay, here it starts here, ends here. Okay, great, fantastic. I'm going to name this, this is a cue now, and I'm going to name it something. So like 1M1, that's the, quote unquote beginning of the film. 1M2, 1M3, 2M7, 2M8, etc., etc. So, but sometimes these cues, what happens is, when the composer writes the score, they end the cue and then they start the next one, so they end, 2M1 and they start on 2M2. But sometimes these cues, they abut. So when one ends, it's actually not a true ending. You have to start the next one. They kind of jump from one into the next and into the next, sometimes for 15, 20 minutes, direct one cue to the next. And figuring out these transitions is something that is sometimes quite challenging. And that's kind of where I think I have a little bit of a leg up, because I'm a, pro conductor who does this for a living. I'm not just sitting here in my studio creating these things. I actually create them, but then I go out and I conduct them. And then I go like, well, that worked well. Or, oh my God, that did not work as well as I thought it would. And so, these all become little learning points that just kind of add to my toolbox, so that later when I'm working on something, I can go like, I remember that this happened back then and this didn't work. And I said to myself, I was going to try something else. So let's try that something else and see if that works,
I imagine you had a lot of fun seeing an audience that perhaps wouldn't come to see a symphony play, but you opened up, you enlightened a 50-year-old man or a 10-year-old child to the kind of music that you're a part of, and you meld those two worlds together that when I was a kid, it seemed like they couldn't be further apart, classical music or symphony music, in pop culture movies. Like, no, but it's so funny because in those movies, you have string instruments, you have a full orchestra supplying the soundtrack. So it does make sense, but it doesn't. But and you get to see that firsthand, like these people's eyes light up when they hear this music, and you introduce them to a whole genre of music perhaps they didn't even know.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like so many people, so there's one thing that I love to do, Tom, and that's like after concert, I come to the front of the stage and I try to talk to people who are there, just to ask them, hey, did you enjoy? What was your favorite, part of the, of the show? What did you like, etc. And there's not a single show where there isn't at least one person who says, this is our first time hearing a live orchestra. We'd never heard a live orchestra ever. So, and it's absolutely amazing. And it's so amazing that sitting here, we can hear so much more detail of what's in the film than what we hear in the movie theater or at home,
Yeah.
And so, and to me, that's super gratifying because to me personally, I think my mission is not just to entertain people, but to educate people. And if I can bring people into the concert hall so that, after they hear a film score, they can hear an opera, they can listen to Brahms or Mahler or whatever it is, they can come to the symphony and listen to a classical program, and they can begin to understand what those composers wanted. And so much of music is not absolute music, it's actually programmatic music. So for instance, when you listen to the Pastoral by Beethoven, you may think that it's just music, which would be what we call absolute music, right? There's no program to it. It's just music. He just sat down, wrote whatever came to his mind or to his
just this guy
heart
doing
or
his
whatever.
thing.
And it doesn't mean anything. But in reality, it's like a lot more that we may not see or understand, a priori, meaning, prior to actually hearing the piece. It's actually programmatic. Like Beethoven actually was thinking of a storm. He was thinking of a countryside, and there's so much of it, so much music that has programs where the composer was thinking about things and he was describing those things musically. And then he may have put that in his or her program notes, or he may not have. Some of us just want the audience to figure it out. We don't want to tell them, oh, here I was thinking of going down this river, and then, once you turn the bend, there's a village, and they were playing the X and Y kind of music. Smetana's Moldau comes to mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we want you to figure it out. Oh, wait a minute, there's a jazz band here, or something, like, yeah. So yeah, to me, that's super, super gratifying. Bring as many new people into the concert hall as we can.
Yeah, and I imagine, a lot of people, they watch TV or they watch movies or they've watched these movies on a TV that didn't have surround sound, or on their phone or their iPad with not great headphones or what have you. So to hear this with people, and that's the big thing with movies, right? And music, to experience it with people is just a completely different experience. And to experience at a place like the Auditorium Theatre in Chicago, it is an iconic building. It's massive, it's warm, it's beautiful. Then you have this orchestra and everybody, like, I feel like a lot of people might watch this movie and find parts that they didn't even realize were there because of the live music.
Yeah, and it sounds wonderful. That hall just sounds wonderful. I mean, I love performing there. And I mean, of course, not to mention that the Chicago Philharmonic, I mean, this is going to be their 11th film in concert at the Auditorium. They just did La La Land, which is one of the first shows that I conducted, actually, when I was green, fresh out of school. And, my being a composer and a jazz pianist, that's why they figured, okay, Thiago, can you conduct La La Land? Like, go to Turkey and China and, premiere this thing first. Sure. And then I looked at the score like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? But yeah, 11th film concert with the Chicago Phil, and they're fantastic. I mean, what a wonderful orchestra. It's so easy to work with them. Everything works, super professional, sounds amazing. I'm always so happy to come back to the Chicago Philharmonic.
Do you guys have, like when you do live performances without a movie, there's a little intermission. Is there an intermission with the movie, or is this, you guys just plow straight through and do the whole thing?
There is an intermission with a movie. It's just a little too long. And so, yeah. So when I get these projects, well, we actually do everything in-house. So we do all the video editing, all the audio editing, the score editing. We actually print parts. We bind books for the entire orchestra. We ship them to the orchestra so that they can use. We receive them. We look at the changes and we go like, oh, that was a correction. Okay, good. Let's make sure that this gets fixed for the next printing and so on. So we're kind of like a turnkey solution. So when I first get a project, I look at it and I go like, okay, that's too long. We need an intermission. Great. Then I basically work with the producers to go like, hey guys, I think the intermission is here. Tell me what you think. And I basically, send them some videos and they go like, yeah, that's good. Or I basically try to give 2 or 3 options. And I say, I think it's option 1, but here's option 2 and 3. And then they go like, well, we think option 2. And I'm like, okay, fine, option 2. So, we basically have to figure out where it goes and try to find some place where it goes, where it makes sense, of course, with the story and with the music too. But yeah, so yeah, anyway, there is an intermission that's very, very normal. So yeah, it's basically, an opera in 2 acts. So.
When you do these projects, when you get like, say a movie that hasn't been done this way, and they're like, hey, we want to do the Goonies. How long does it take you to go from, oh, the Goonies, I know. I mean, I'm sure that you said you watched a lot of movies as a kid. I'm sure you watched the Goonies at some point, right, when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right.
So
you have this movie from your childhood, and now they're like, okay, now turn it into this experience. How is that terrifying, first of all? And does it take a long time for you to really kind of, from, the moment they tell you to the premiere date, what is that time period like?
It's terrifying if they say you have a month.
Yeah, I imagine
Then it's terrifying because it takes, if we're really, really working really fast, and the way I work is like, I have a team of assistants that will help me with the engraving, but I look at every single note, every single indication. I look through everything. So, because I like to be very specific, and it's always good to have another pair of eyes.
Sure.
Actually, checking things. So when we're going full blast and I have 10 assistants, it can take like 2 months. Um, from the time that we receive the materials to the time that we are like, um, um, printing the scores. But a more regular and easier timeline for us is like 4 months, between 4 months and then like 6 months to me is like, oh my God, this is joy, like pure joy. But even if we have 6 months, I may get done with a project in 3 months, 3 or 4. So
That's
4 is very comfortable. 3 is great. 2 is like, and 1 is like absolute insanity. I mean, we did Get Happy, a Judy Garland Centennial Celebration, which is a show for big band and orchestra. And we did that in like a month and a half, and that was like, it's a lot of music, super fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think I employed 12 assistants for that one. That was the most I've ever done. And I kind of came up to my limit because, with 12 people, they're all sending you stuff. How do you have time to look through everything? I mean, I did look through everything, but it was just like, okay, I've hit my limit. And I basically slept half an hour every night for the whole time, so.
That's, yeah. I mean, and that's with assistance. My goodness, that sounds, I mean, I'm sure it's a lot more work than people give you credit for, except outside of your industry, I should say. But my goodness, I mean, it's got to be fun as well. As we're sitting here talking,
It is.
I'm thinking about movies that, man, oh man, this would be great. And you talked a little bit about Get Out and that being like the horror genre. But I imagine there's classics like like even the movie Psycho, that iconic, the whole introduction, the whole first part of the movie is that music, that build, because that's Alfred Hitchcock at movie
Psycho.
making minds.
Psycho has been done. One that came to mind now that you mention it is Ben-Hur. I would love to do Ben-Hur, the old Ben-Hur.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that would be like, because that music is amazing, and or Kong would also be King Kong
Talk about
would be
classics.
amazing because that music is just absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I mean anything by Eric Wolf and Korngold. Alfred Newman, anything by those guys, Max Steiner. I mean, pretty much anything would be like, to me, would be like super happy.
Is there a point where you ever would want to do this from scratch? Meaning, say a movie hasn't been out released yet, but they come to you, hey, there's this movie we want to do, but we need a score. We want you to do the score, almost like reverse engineer. Is that something that, is more terrifying than trying to adapt something else like this? Or is this like free reign because it's all you and you get to do what you want to do?
No, so again, my background is as a film composer, and I have written film scores in the past. And basically, I use that knowledge to create these shows live, because at the same time that I was actually doing my film scoring, I was actually assistant conducting in regular orchestras.
Oh,
so,
I see.
Bach, Brahms, Beethoven, Mahler, that kind of thing. And then I was also, going to operas and, working with singers, and so I have written film scores. I've conducted like quote unquote classical music. I've conducted operas. I love working with singers. So I would, first of all, yes, I would love to do that. That would be amazing. So I can go back to my roots a little bit.
Yeah.
And what I would do, which is something that a lot of composers are doing these days already, because of is to write the film score already thinking that maybe this becomes a live concert.
Oh.
And what happens is you do a bit of planning and a bit of like bookkeeping, in a sense, where you write the music and you already save it, so to speak, so that someone like me can then take it and very easily go like, oh, okay, great, it's all here. Print the score, done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean.
So but I would love to do that. I would love to score the next Star Wars or something, man. That would be just absolutely. I love Star Wars. I'm a huge, huge Star Wars fan. I built my own lightsaber, actually sitting there on the wall.
Fantastic.
So, and I love conducting Star Wars, and I love, man,
Well,
and that's the kind of music that I love to write. So, yeah.
I feel like you have an in with Disney since you've done a couple Disney films already with the project you're doing. I'm like, hey, by the way, here's what I have for you guys.
Disney concerts, a little bit of an in. I mean, I'm one of their, you know, one of their conductors, but yeah, I don't know. I still have to be discovered as a composer, I suppose. But maybe, who knows? Maybe it'll happen.
Yeah, you never know, you know, and you have an in more than most people in the world. So, hey, you know what? Always hope. Have you seen, you know, the orchestras with, like with bands? You know, like I'm thinking specifically like the band Metallica with like the San Francisco, you know, symphony, and that is that similar or is that completely different? Or, you know, because I imagine playing string version of like Enter Sandman, which is a, you know, hard rock song. It's got to be difficult. Is it the same, you know, difficultness to try to mirror something that's so not at its core, or is it more simple just because music, you know, when you strip it all down, you can strip it back and then rebuild it, you know, as one would with something like that?
Right. Yeah. It depends a lot. It depends on the arrangement, you know. Um, and this is funny that you mentioned that because in when I was at NYU, one of my colleagues had his recital, and he asked me to conduct this like chamber orchestra with his band, and they played hard rock. So I had to put on earplugs because it was just so loud. But like, you know, and so anyway, I have done just that one show. I think that was like just absolutely hard rock with, you know, with orchestra way back in 2011, I'd say. So, God, it was like forever ago. But these types of shows exist now. You know, there's the Beatles with orchestra.
Yeah.
Danny Elfman has a gig that he's been doing at Coachella, which is absolutely fun. I haven't seen it, but absolutely fantastic. I've always had something going on, so I have not been able to see. Danny's an amazing person, amazing guy, wonderful person, wonderful composer, of course, and a wonderful performer. So yeah, I hear that it's amazing, and that is, you know, rock with you know, like rock pop with orchestra. So yeah, a lot of these things do exist. Depends on the orchestration, depends on what the orchestra is required to do and how they build it. But basically for us orchestra musicians, it's like if it's on the page and it's clear and we have a clear leader, we're good. We can do anything, you know, as long as we know what's required of us, we can do anything, just about anything, you know. Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, and people will be able to see that with the Goonies all in one full swoop of a immersive experience at the Auditorium Theatre here on Saturday, April 26th in Chicago, 7:30. I want to make sure I try this one more time. Chicago? Okay. Chicago.
Perfect.
Chiberio.
Yeah.
Not a Chiago, thank you so much for being such a wonderful person to talk with here and humoring my Midwest accent, butchering your name. I'm sorry.
You're totally fine. I mean,